Happening.
Anyway, I'm fine. Thank you. I'm better, but still I have dry cough. Let's see. Today is going to be a full and stretch class. No? Let me see after this. Okay. So we'll get started. Sharing my screen. I hope you guys are able to see, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what are all the chapters we have completed? So in the first volume, we are done with 1 minute. Sorry. So in the first volume, we are done with chapter 1, right? So chapter 1, what was it all about? So there is a reason why I'm asking all these things. You will understand slowly. So chapter 1 was all about what?
Electric charges.
Electric charges.
So the name of the chapter is electric charges, and we learned something like fields, right? So if you have a parameter or something or an object which has a property called as an electric charge associated with it, you can find a certain field around it. Am I right? So what is the name of the field that we observed?
Electric.
So when you have electric charges, especially when they are at rest, right? So this chapter was under a branch of physics which we called it as electrostatics, right? Electro refers to charges. Electro doesn't mean electrons, okay? Electro refers to charges and static refers to charges at the rest part. Similarly, in chapter 2, we learned the parameters called as, we learned certain variables called as electrostatic potential and potential energy, and then we learned about capacitance, right? So what did we do in the third chapter? That was current electricity.
Current charges.
So in the first two chapters, we tried to keep the charges at rest, right? Then we try to observe what happens when the charges tend to move with a particular velocity, with an average velocity associated with them, which is called as the drift velocity. So here, what was the current we were mainly concentrating upon? It was direct current. Though we use the word current electricity, we concentrated only on the term called as direct current, right? So what was chapter 4 all about? So like how electric charges which are at rest
Can induce magnetism.
generated electric field. Yes. If you put the same charges in motion, we can generate magnetism. Means there is magnetic field around it. Right. So what is the name of the fifth chapter, guys?
Magnetism and matter.
So magnetism and matter. Let me tell you what it is. Okay. So then what did we see? We saw chapter 6, which was about electromagnetic induction, which was exactly the reverse process of what we learned in the fourth chapter, right? In the fourth chapter, we understood when you put the charges in motion, you generate magnetism. In the sixth chapter, we understood from magnetism, you can generate electric field.
Sir, we haven't done the fifth chapter yet, right?
Yeah, we didn't do. Similarly, chapter 7 is what?
Alternating current.
Alternating current. So this also we completed. In alternating current, we try to understand what is the difference between a direct current and alternating current, and we try to understand what happens when an alternating source is connected across different passive elements like resistors, capacitors, and inductors, right? Then the chapter 8, that is the last part in this book, is called as electromagnetic waves. If you observe the way the chapters are designed, you know, the first two chapters speak only about electric field, and these four chapters speak about magnetic field, and the last chapter speaks about the combination of both the fields. You would understand. That is why it is referred to as electro. Electro refers to electric, magnetic refers to obviously magnetic. So this electromagnetic waves, this chapter will be the link to the next chapter in your next volume, that is ray optics. So for you to understand this ray optics concept, you need to have a clarity of all these things. I hope you're able to understand the outline of how the syllabus is designed. So today what we are going to do is, we are going to discuss about the magnetism. Yeah, tell me.
So sorry for the interruption. Kailash is in the waiting room.
Yeah. There is no waiting room. There is no waiting room.
He says that he's waiting for the past 10 minutes.
He has to sign in and come. Ask him to sign in and come.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to see magnetism and matter. Okay. Now the question is about, in fourth chapter also we learned magnetism, right? The name of the chapter was moving charges and magnetism. Then what is this chapter 5 called as magnetism and matter? What is the difference between both? So that is what we need to understand. Right? Can someone guess what would be the difference?
Charges at rest.
Sorry?
Charges at rest.
See, but the first chapter told us when the charges are at rest, there is only electric field present, right? For magnetism to get generated, what do we need? We need to put the charges in motion, right? So that's what we did in the fourth chapter, moving charges and magnetism. Means if the charges were moving, we had magnetism around. Now, again, my question is, why we have already learned about magnetism? Why are we learning about magnetism, and what is this matter all about? That's what the question is. Right? Sorry, I didn't get you. Your voice is breaking.
The substance
Can
which
you
are
repeat
produced those magnetic fields about we are going to study about.
Okay, then here also there were certain substances which produce magnetic field, right? Then what is the difference between the substances in the fourth chapter, and why do we need a separate chapter again? Right, that's a question to answer again. So what exactly happened in the fourth chapter? Can you guys tell me? When was magnetism generated? Was it available every time?
Only when charges were in motion.
When there is a change in
only when the charges were in motion, you were able to generate magnetism. Means if you go in the reverse track, if you need to put the charges in motion, if you need to move something, right, according to Newton's law, if you need to move something, what is that you're supposed to do? Newton's first law says. So if you have an object in your hand, let's say small particle, if you need to move it, what is needed according to the dynamics? You need to apply a force on it.
External force.
Am I right? So you apply a force, the object tends to accelerate. These are all the simple concepts we know. F is equal to ma, all those stories we know according to the mechanics part. So here what we did is to put the charges in motion. It is not like we got into the conductor and we started pushing the electrons, right? It happened under what conditions? You need to connect what across the conductor. You need to apply potential difference. Potential difference indirectly will generate. So that's why, see, the potential difference comes from the potential difference will automatically produce the electrostatic force. And that electrostatic force was the one which was responsible to move the charges. And when the charges were moving, you observed magnetism around it. Am I right? So if you observe one common point here, if you need magnetism, what is needed? the charges are supposed to move. That's the common conclusion that we are coming to. Am I right? Is there any confusion in this? So if anybody asks you, when will magnetism get generated? Only when the charges are in motion. The reason for that is beyond our scope of understanding, because you need to understand theory of relativity and all those things for that. That's not our headache. Let's not worry about it. But is this point clear for everyone? I'm trying to say, you need magnetism. What should come to your mind? You need charges with
Motion.
motion. So they need to be in motion. So when that happened in the 4th chapter, means if I have a conductor in my hand, the 4th chapter, if you observe, if you revisit again and see, if you have a conductor in your hand, in every question you would have connected a potential source across it. Means, if suppose I connect a switch here, okay, switch or a key like this, if I keep it open, will you be able to observe any magnetic effect?
No.
No.
Right? I close it, then the current is going to be in a loop. If suppose I try to bring any magnetic substance close to it, will it get attracted? Means will there, or else if I place a compass here, I would have showed you the simulation, right? Oysters experiment. If you place a compass here, what will happen? The compass needle will start showing reflection, which automatically it tells us that there is some magnetic field present. Am I right? Now, what will happen if I open the switch?
The compass will come back to its original position.
See, compass will come back to its original position, depending it, but different materials will take different amount of time. When it comes back to the undeflected portion, what is it telling us? Means magnetism is lost. So, can I call these kind of magnets as temporary magnets? Am I right? Or the technical name given for it is an electromagnet. Means you are using electricity to generate magnetism. Don't get confused between electromagnet and electromagnetic waves. They both are different. Electromagnet, not magnetic. Okay. What do you mean by electromagnet? Temporary magnets. Am I right? Now the question is, in the magnetism chapter, we are not going to deal with temporary magnets anymore. Rather, we'll be concentrating on permanent magnets. Right? You would have seen permanent magnets in your lower grades. Right? You would have seen a horseshoe magnet. You would have seen a bar magnet. Did you guys see or not?
Yes,
You
sir.
have a basic
Sir.
idea of what are all these things, right?
Yes,
So you have a north and you have 2 poles associated with it, north and a south pole. So all these are permanent magnets. But here comes the important question which we are supposed to answer for us to enter into this chapter. What did I say is the reason for magnetism?
Change in
Moving
charges.
charges.
Means the charges are supposed to move. Am I right? So in this case, I'm obviously able to understand that my charges are moving because I've connected a potential source. The current electricity part is telling me as long as you have a potential difference across the ends of a conductor, current is generated. But when you use a permanent magnet, it is a real-time phenomenon that you people have observed. If you use a permanent magnet, you try to take it close to some iron material, it starts getting attracted. Am I right? So if that is happening, where have we applied the potential difference for those charges to move, or where are the charges even moving for that magnetism to get generated? Is this not an important point we need to answer? Are you guys able to understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So here comes the important question. Here you don't take this bar magnet and connect it across potential. So you don't connect it across any switch or something, like you don't plug into anything. You just hold it. Yes, it is able to attract the ion particles. How is it able to do? That's the question. Okay. But we are still sticking to the basics, saying that yes, there are moving charges, but where is it happening? That's what is going to be the beginning part of this chapter. I hope you understood why we are studying this. In this chapter, we will mainly concentrate only on permanent magnets. We will try to understand the magnetic properties of those materials. That is why the name of the chapter is called as Magnetism and Matter. Okay. Now, let me start with it. So, if you observe in the 4th chapter, right, there is one topic which I didn't explain at that point. So, it is in page 162, which is called as the magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. Okay. This is going to give you the answer for the question which I asked. What did I say? You need the charges to be in motion. Means they need to accelerate. They need to experience a force. Okay. So for them to experience, generally when we think of experiencing force, our mind starts thinking of translatory motion. Need not be translatory always, right? So let's try to answer. Am I clear till this point? Is there any doubt? I hope everyone is clear.
Yes, sir.
If you're
Yes,
not
sir.
able to switch on the mic, let me know in the chat box. I hope Kailash is in.
Yes, sir.
No. You're there. Okay. Okay. Shall I proceed then?
Yes, sir.
Now see, in the basic chemistry, in the basic atomic structure, we have learned that all the materials in this world are made up of atoms. And atoms obviously have what present in them? They have
Electron.
they have the electrons revolving, right? According to Bohr's theory, we know that electrons are going to revolve in, recollect all those concepts. Electrons are going
Circular
to revolve
orbits.
only in circular orbits. They are called as stationary orbits, right? Only in those circular orbits where something is conserved. What is that? The word starts with A. No. Energy is conserved because it's electrostatic force. Electrostatic force is conservative in nature. That's not the answer. He has proposed something. The word starts with A. Sorry?
Acceleration.
What is this?
Both.
L is equal to NH by 2. Have you guys seen this equation? If you recollect.
Angular momentum.
Yes, it is angular momentum. Very good. So, electrons will be able to revolve in those orbits where the angular momentum is said to be quantized. Quantized means something which is multiplied with an integer value, a constant multiplied with integer value. For example, when I say charge is quantized, Q is equal to N into E. E is a constant multiplied with N, we call it as quantized, right? Similarly, H by 2 pi. H is a Planck's constant, 2 pi is a constant, which is multiplied with N, we call it as quantized. So angular momentum is going to be quantized. And we know that they are going to be in the circular orbits. Now let's recollect the concept again. When an object is in a circular orbit, will it experience a force or not? Is it going to experience a force or not? So any object in circular motion, what is the necessary force which is required for the particle to be put in a circular motion? This was a
Centripetal.
Yes, it is a centripetal force that is needed. Right. So when I speak only about centripetal force, what do you call it? It is a uniform circular motion. If along with the centripetal force, there is a tangential force also acting, that is a non-uniform circular motion. But here our concept is only uniform circular motion. Okay. So there is going to be a centripetal force. If this is an electron, if this is the nucleus part, which has the protons, which contribute to the positive charge, which is given by Z into E, what is the force that is going to exist between the nucleus and the electrons? So which force is providing the necessary centripetal force? Charge and a charge. What is the name of the force between two charges?
Electrostatic.
Electrostatic force. So here, electrostatic force KZD into E divided by R square is what is providing the necessary centripetal force, mv square divided by R. Are you guys able to visualize this? So what I'm trying to say from here is every material is made up of atoms, and atoms contain electrons which are going to revolve in a circular orbit. By experiencing a centripetal force, there is an extra information for you to have in mind. Okay. Now we are going to see, or we are going to mathematically prove, stating that the electrons, when they are able to be in a circular orbit, will constitute to some magnetic dipole moment. That is what we are going to derive. Okay. Now, before you derive, you just need to recollect certain terms. So, in the 4th chapter, right, we learned a concept called as magnetic dipole moment. What is it all about? Can you guys tell me what is the formula for it?
NIA.
It is Ni into A. Means the current multiplied with the area.
Magnetic
If it has number of terms, yes, you are going to multiply it with N. So the basic definition says the current multiplied with the area is going to give you the magnetic dipole moment. So have this point in your mind. No. So write down the heading in your notes saying that the magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. Where is it revolving? In an orbit. Okay. So write down this heading. The magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. And this is the reason why magnetism is generated or magnetism is existing within a permanent magnet. Okay. So make a note of it, guys. Write it down. Okay. So I done. Now tell me one thing. See. Let me read this part out. The electron has a charge E and performs a uniform circular motion around the stationary heavy nucleus which has a charge of plus Zt. So when this is going to happen, when this electron is in motion, we know that the rate at which an electron is flowing constitutes to electric current. So what is the basic formula for electric current?
Q by T.
Q by T.
Yes. 1 minute. So let's write the first step. I is equal to Q by T. Here, what is a Q that is constituted? The electron has a charge E. And how much time does it take for completing one revolution? The time taken to complete one revolution is called as?
Time period.
The time period. Am I right? So it is a time period. So when you have an electron revolving like this around a nucleus, right? So if I call this as the radius of that particular orbit, okay? So all these things you learn in the 12th chapter again. So if I take R to be the radius, what is the time taken by this particle to complete one revolution? Time is equal to distance by speed.
2 pi r by v.
So 2 pi r is the distance and v is the speed. And how is the speed going to be? It is going to be tangential to the surface. Am I clear till this point? 1 and 2. So I will be equal to E divided by, what is it? 2 pi r divided by v. Can I write it like this? It will go to the numerator. So E into v divided by 2 pi r. Let me call this as 3. So this is going to be the expression for current in terms of charge, the speed of the particle, and the radius of the orbit. Is it clear till the step, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
But what do we know the magnetic dipole moment as?
IA.
I.
So magnetic dipole moment, see here it is represented with the symbol mu. Or you can write capital M also. In this context, it is represented with symbol mu. Nothing to get confused, okay? So mu is equal to, I'm sticking to the basic, I into A. What is I? E into V divided by 2 pi R into what is the value of A?
Pi r square.
Pi r
It
square.
is pi R square, right? R and R are gone. Pi and pi gone. So E into V divided by 2 into R. So this is the value of magnetic dipole moment. Okay. But whose theory did I relate to when I spoke about this atom? Whose structure of atom model am I following? Or are we following? The Niels Bohr. So according to Bohr, what is the important condition for the particle, for the electron to be in circular orbit? That's what we started with. Something should be quantized. The angular momentum is supposed to be quantized. So this is a concept we know. But now my question is, we wrote L is equal to NH by 2 pi. So this is according to Bohr's theory. But if you revisit rotation mechanics chapter, angular momentum itself has a definition associated with it. Can someone tell me what is it? Just like how we saw torque in different chapters, here we are talking about angular momentum. So what is this angular momentum all about? So make a note of it. Angular momentum, it's a vector quantity in the first place. It is called as the moment of linear momentum. moment of the linear momentum is what is called as angular momentum. Okay. If suppose this is the point about which you have an axis. Let's say there's the electron that is revolving at a distance r. So when the electron is revolving in a circular orbit, the velocity of the electron is going to be how is it going to be? It is always going to be tangential. I hope this point is clear. So if I take this as the curved path, for this curved path at this point, it is going to be tangential to the surface. When I say it is tangential, it is perpendicular to the radius, right? So when you talk about velocity, mass multiplied with velocity is going to give you what?
Linear momentum.
Momentum.
Linear momentum. So wherever you see moment of something, no, it is the cross product of the distance vector and the vector for which you're taking the momentum. R vector cross P vector. So R vector cross P vector is what is called as angular momentum. Similarly, what is torque?
R vector cross F vector.
R cross F. That is called as moment of force. Do you people remember that? So torque is called as moment of force. Moment of force means R vector cross F vector. That is why moment abdin bata in physics, wherever you say moment, it means the cross product of the it's the cross product of the distance vector with the physical quantity for which you're taking the moment. Am I clear till this step? So R vector cross P vector, or I can write it as RP sine theta. Correct? So I can write it as RP sine theta. But what is P?
MV.
P is nothing but MV. Let's try to derive an expression for it. Okay. So R vector cross P vector, or I can write it as RP sine theta into n cap. Okay, if you write it in the vector form still. What is this n cap, guys? You people know by now.
Unit vector.
So it is a unit vector, and how is it?
Unit vector.
Perpendicular to both
Unit vector.
vector quantities.
That is the most important point here. It is a unit vector which is perpendicular to both the quantities for which you are doing the cross product. This fourth chapter was completely about cross product, right? We used I cap, J cap, and find out here also, right? If I take only the magnitude, can I write it as R into, in the place of P, I can replace it with
MV.
M into V sine theta. Can I write it like, so MV sine theta, MV R sine theta. Can I write it like this? MV R sine theta, right? What does theta represent? Theta represents the angle between which two vectors? R vector and linear momentum. So when I say R vector and linear momentum vector, I can even say R vector and velocity vector because mass doesn't have any direction, right? So linear momentum will be in the same direction in which the velocity is. Am I clear till this step? Is there any doubt? So this is the formula you would have learned last year, MVR sine theta. Is it clear till this step? I hope you guys are making a note of it.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Right. So what I'm going to, so MVR sine theta is in my mind. MVR sine theta. Tell me in this case where we are discussing, what is the angle between R vector and V vector?
90 degrees.
Theta is 90 degrees. I hope no doubt in this. So it is going to be only MVR. Right? M into V into R. Why I told all this story is because I want my magnetic dipole moment expression to be in terms of linear momentum. If I look at this expression, what is missing for me to write the expression for linear momentum?
M.
It is R at a. Look at it. What is missing? V into R is there. It is a mass that is missing. So E into, what I'm going to do is I'll multiply with mass and divide it with mass. Can I do this? If I do this, then this is going to give me E divided by 2m into L. So mu is equal to E into E into L divided by 2m. In your textbook, I think they have given in small l. So there's the one. Okay, why that minus sign I'll explain. Don't worry about it. Tell me, just tell me one thing. Are you guys clear till this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So make a note of it. So E into L divided by 2M. This is a very important derivation because, as I told you, this is the base of the chapter. You need to understand what it is. Shall I proceed? So E into L divided by 2M. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to establish a relation between the vector quantities here. Now tell me, what are all the vector quantities that are present here? So what are all the vector quantities we have?
L.
L.
Angular momentum is a vector quantity. Okay, if I write angular momentum as a vector quantity, the next question is, E is obviously a scalar, M is a scalar. Then magnetic dipole moment also should be a vector quantity, right? Because you cannot equate a scalar to a vector. I cannot write distance on one side and displacement on other side. If I write displacement on one side, other side also should be some vector quantity. Am I right? So if that should happen, then this magnetic dipole moment is also a vector quantity. Now our work is to establish the relation between them in terms of direction. Okay, let's see how to do it. Now, see, direction of dipole moment. This recollecting it. Direction of dipole moment. Now, do you people remember this clock rule?
Yes,
I would have explained this. When the current is flowing in the clockwise direction, what pole is it acting on?
South pole.
South pole.
South pole.
So you're seeing the south pole. At the back of the paper, it is going to be north pole. Am I right? Now the question is, let's take, I'm going to create a similarity between an electromagnet, because I'm talking about direction of current, and a permanent magnet. North pole, south pole. So for a permanent magnet, what is the direction of magnetic field?
South to north.
Sir,
South to
from
north.
which direction, sir? Within the magnet or out?
That's the question you're supposed to. You tell me in both the cases. No?
Within the magnet, south to north. Outside the magnet,
Okay.
north to south.
North
Very
to
good.
south.
So outside it is from north to south. Inside it is from south to north, because unlike electric field, what will happen with magnetic field? It forms a complete loop. Electric fields do not form complete loops, right? So, but I hope you people remember this concept. If I have a positive charge and negative charge, if I ask you, what is the direction of electric field? What will you say? The electric field emerges out from a positive charge and it reaches the negative charge. Am I right? So in a similar way, instead of positive charge, the pole that you have is a north pole. North pole will behave similar to a positive charge, and south pole will behave similar to a negative charge. I hope it is clear to this point. Second question to be answered is, what is the direction of electric dipole moment? What
Negative.
is the direction? It is from the negative to the positive charge, right? In a similar way, what will be the direction of magnetic dipole moment?
south to north.
It will be from south to north. So this is the direction of mu. Mu means, did we find the direction of mu now? We know that the direction of mu is from south pole to north pole. As simple as that. And it is obviously going to exist only within the magnet. Is this clear till this step? Right? Now tell me one thing. When the current, so let's come back to the electromagnet. When the current is flowing in the clockwise direction, so you are able to see the south pole. Then what is there on the other side? Obviously, it is the north pole. So from south to north within the magnet, because this whole thing is the magnet, right? So permanent magnet is telling us that the direction of magnetic dipole moment is from south to north within the magnet. That point is to be underlined. So here, this electric conductor is going to act like the magnet. Then what is going to be the direction of dipole moment in terms of I cap, J cap, and K cap? Tell me.
Minus I.
Minus?
I.
No. Hey, this is South Pole. Then what is there on the back side of the paper?
North Pole.
So minus
So,
K.
North Pole. It is
Minus
minus
K.
K cap. It is minus K cap because that is the direction. Oh, you keep your book on the table. Okay, visualize in the way I'm explaining it. You keep your book on the table, draw the same diagram. Now observe, South Pole is what you're facing. You're acting like South Pole and your book is acting like North Pole. So from you towards your book, you're seeing in which direction? You're seeing downward direction or upward direction, obviously. Which direction are you looking at?
Downward.
Downward, right? Downward is minus K cap according. Anything away from us is minus K cap. Right, that's what. I hope it is clear. Is there anyone who wouldn't understand? So it is.
Can you repeat it again, sir?
Yeah, I'll do that. See, you exactly do it like a small activity, which I'm saying. You keep the book on your table, draw the same diagram that I've given you. So when the current is flowing in the clockwise direction, okay, when the current is flowing in the clockwise direction, it is behaving like a South Pole. Means you're the South Pole. The back of the book is the North Pole. Means, let's say the table on which you have kept it is the North Pole. So the magnetic field within the magnet is acting from you towards the table. So how are you looking at the table? You're looking at it in the downward direction, right? It is away from you. So anything away from you is taken as minus K cap. I hope it is clear.
Yes, sir.
So can I write it as mu minus K cap is equal to E divided by 2m into what is the direction of L vector? So to find out the direction of L vector, I gave you the formula again already. So it is velocity vector like this and it is the R vector like this. Now the question is, what is angular momentum R vector cross P vector? R vector is in which direction? R?
Minus I.
Hey, look at it.
I
I
cap.
cap.
From the axis of rotation you need to, because the electron is revolving about this axis. It is I cap cross P vector is
J cap.
J cap.
K cap.
It's okay.
so R MB into I cap cross 1 minute. So, I cap cross J cap. What is it?
K cap.
K cap.
K cap.
So MBR K cap. So this is happening in the direction of K cap. So what can you conclude from both? The magnetic dipole moment and the angular momentum. How are they with respect to each other? One is in minus K cap, one is in plus K cap. They both are in
Opposite direction.
opposite direction. And that is the reason why this minus sign is given. Okay, they would have not mentioned all these things. See, negative sign indicates that the angular momentum of the electron is in the opposite direction of magnetic field. But there's the whole story behind it. Did you guys understand this? Right?
Yes, sir.
So mu is equal to, I will directly write this, minus E divided by 2m into L. Please make a note of it. So this is going to be the value of the magnetic dipole moment. We are almost done with the derivation. 5 more minutes. So make a note of it. Done?
Done, sir.
Yeah. So if I take only the magnitude, mu is equal to E divided by 2m into, can I write it as L? If I consider only magnitude, because minus sign has something to do with the direction. Now mu is equal to E divided by 2m. What did I say L is? L is angular momentum, and according to Bohr's theory, it is quantized. So L. So what is the expression that he gave us? L is equal to
NH2 pi by
MV.
NH by NH divided by 2 pi. Right. So here E is a constant, M is a mass of electron constant, H is a constant, 2 pi is a constant. If I put N is equal to 1, then what will be the value of E? E into H divided by 2 pi M. Is it a constant? Right, everything is a constant, right? 2 pi M E H, everything is a constant. So let me show you something. When you substitute all these values and put n is equal to 1, then you will have the least value, that is the minimum value of the magnetic dipole moment, which has, oh, did I miss a 2? I'm sorry. I left this 2. So 2 into 2, 4 pi m. So E into H divided by 4 pi m. So this value is there, right? When you multiply everything, the value comes out to be 9.27 into 10 power minus 24. And we know the unit of magnetic dipole moment is ampere meter square, because we told I into A. I is measured in ampere, A is measured in meter square. So this value is what is called as the minimum value of the magnetic dipole moment. And the name given to this is called as the Bohr magneton. Okay. So if they ask you what is the value of the Bohr magneton, you should remember it. It is 9.27 into 10 power minus 24. And how will you get it? You will get it by considering the electron to revolve in which orbit?
First orbit.
The first orbit. So what is the other name for the Bohr magneton? It is nothing but the minimum value of the dipole moment of the electron. Okay, make a note of it, please. Okay. So whatever we discussed is actually the 4th chapter, but this should have been the starting part of the 5th chapter. That's why we didn't teach it at that time. So we are done with the derivation. Is there any doubt? So now I hope you guys got the answer of why permanent magnets have dipole moment associated with them. Right. So
Yes,
who's deciding the magnetic property of it? It is the dipole moment that is getting generated, and the dipole moment is getting generated due to whom? Due to the electron, and when the electron is revolving with a particular velocity associated with it. Right. So from this, can I conclude every material in this world will have some magnetic property associated with it, because everything is made up of atoms, and every atom is made up of electrons. Every material in this world will have magnetism associated with it, but the only point is the level to which they exhibit depends on the extent to which the dipole moment is produced across it. Are you guys able to understand? So based on that only, you will have magnets like ferromagnets. You would have heard at least these terms, right? You have solid state in your chemistry, right? So first chapter in chemistry. So there you would have learned these terms like ferromagnets, paramagnets, and all those things. Right? Paramagnet, diamagnetic, and ferromagnetic. You have antiferromagnetic, all those things. But our concentration will be only upon paramagnetic, diamagnetic, and ferromagnetic. Ferromagnets are strong magnets. Ferro refers to iron. Magnets which are made up of iron. I hope it is clear. Shall I proceed to the next part of the chapter?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So there is a chapter, magnetism and matter. So let's see what are all the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. So basically, if you see, this chapter can be divided into 3 subparts. The first part is about dealing with the bar magnet and permanent magnets. Okay. So if I take this as the first part, the second is Earth's magnetism. Earth's magnetism means how is Earth able to exhibit certain magnetic properties. Okay. So this is going to be the second part. And the third part is you talk about magnets and the properties of the magnet. Like I told you, different types of magnets like paramagnetic substance, ferromagnetic, and diamagnetic. That's what we will be dealing in the third part. Okay. So for everything, the basis, the concept which we discussed till now. Okay. So we'll get started with this first part. That is permanent magnets and electromagnets. Then we will see about the magnet. So these are all very basic things. Let me just run through it. So you know what is a magnet, right? So magnet is a material or object that can produce magnetic field. Right? Obviously, there's invisible and all those things. But how do you observe the magnetic property? By using a sensitive device like a compass or something, right? So how does the compass actually work? If you have the magnet present here, compass is made up of a small needle. It is also magnetic in nature. We know that when a magnetic material is placed in the presence of magnetic field, it experiences torque. So it starts revolving. That is how you will be able to sense it. Right? That is all about a magnet. So this part also you would have learned in your lower grades. You already told me. So you have a permanent magnet. The field around the bar magnet is given like this. By the way, you know what a bar magnet is, right? It looks in the shape of a bar. So it's a rectangular shaped magnets which are present like this. And the magnetic field is from the north to the south pole outside, and inside it is going to be from south to north pole. So properties of magnets also, you know, right? So magnets attract magnetic substances like steel, cobalt, iron. These things are there. You can just go through all these points later. Okay. So one important point to be explained here is, if suppose I have a bar magnet in my hand, it has a north pole and a south pole. Okay. Let's say its length is L. Now, if I break it into two parts, let's say L by 2 and L by 2, then can I say this will act like north pole and this will act like south pole?
No,
Will this
sir.
happen?
No.
It will
They will
not
act
happen.
as individual.
What will happen? They'll act as individual magnets. So what is the important property associated with the magnet? The important property that it exhibits is magnetic monopoles do not exist. Mono means single, pole is polarity. So single poles cannot exist. Means you cannot have a single north pole or a single south pole. Whereas you can have an isolated charge. Charges exhibit isolation, isolated properties. But the magnets do not. So that's what is given here. We cannot isolate the north or the south pole of the magnets. If magnets are broken into two halves, we get two similar bar magnets. But the only thing is, compared to this, the strength of this magnet will be less. Means the attractive property of it is going to be very less. Okay. So that's what happens. So you have natural magnets and artificial magnets. That is, we can create our magnets. Okay. There is a horseshoe magnet. So these are the iron filings, and it starts attracting. If you look from that side, you can see the shape like this. You can see a shape like this. Okay. So these are all the basic terms related to magnets. Now we'll get into the mathematical details again. So just like how we have Coulomb's law for electrostatics, we have Coulomb's law for magnetism also. Okay. So for you to exhibit, or for you to establish the relation of Coulomb's law, what is needed? You need two charges and you need a distance of separation between them. And these charges, if they have the strength as Q1 and Q2, which depends on the number of electrons lost or gained, the force between them is given as directly proportional to product of the charges and inversely proportional to the square of the charge. This is a known fact, right? So when you combine everything and write, F will be equal to K Q1 Q2 divided by R square, where K is what? 1 divided by 4 pi epsilon naught into Q1 Q2 divided by R square. This is going to be the amount of force that is going to exist between these two charges. I hope it is clear, right? So when two charges are separated by distance, we can write the electrostatic force between them. Then what is this Coulomb's law for magnetism? What do we need for establishing the mathematical expression for Coulomb's law in case of magnetism? Okay. So it says like this. The force of interaction between two magnetic poles is directly proportional to what? Here you have charges, right? Here you will have a concept called as pole strength. Okay. So those pole strengths are represented by the symbols M1 and M2. As the name suggests, the strength of a particular pole. Suppose you take this thing, this is called as a north pole, this is a south pole. So each pole is going to have a a strength associated with it, which we call it as the pole strength. So if there are two magnets which are having the pole strengths M1 and M2 and they are separated by distance R. So all these are applicable generally for small bar magnets. Okay, here we don't take very big bar magnets and all. We're going to take these small bar magnets. So when this is the case, then F is given as directly proportional to what? Product of their pole strengths and inversely proportional to the square of the distance of separation between them. So when you write F, what will you write? F will be directly proportional to M1, M2 divided by R square. When the proportionality symbol is removed, instead of 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, you will have mu naught divided by 4 pi into M1, M2 divided by R square. So this is going to give you the value of Coulomb's law for magnetism. Please make a note of it. Are you guys clear with this? No doubt, right? Are you guys there?
Sir, can you scroll down a little bit, sir?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Sir?
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, if M1 and M2 are different, sir, if we draw magnetic field lines, it will be concentrated at one side, no, sir?
Yes, it will be.
Okay.
So
See,
let me explain what this pole strength is. Okay, if you have to visualize what it is. North pole. Let's say I have a magnet like this in my hand. I have, let's say, this magnet 1, this magnet 2. Let's say it also obviously has a north pole and south pole. Now I'm going to draw a set of field lines around it. Now, looking at the diagram, tell me which one is a stronger magnet?
Magnet 1.
First one.
Magnet 1 is. So why did you say 1 is stronger?
More
More
field
field
lines.
lines.
Or field lines.
It's more field lines. See, more field lines. Can I say more is the density? So the density has a technical term associated which is called as flux. Right? That's what flux actually means. Flux is nothing but the extent to which the field lines are dense at a particular point. Okay? So the amount of flux that is emanating from a particular pole is generally what is called as the pole strength. That is going to decide the strength of a pole. So you're able to say this because if I take it, it will have a better attractive property compared to this. Okay, so that is a term that pole strength is coming into picture. Okay, if I call the pole strength as M, then, okay, let's say this is both the poles of the same magnet have pole strength M. Generally, north pole will be stronger if I take it like this. If M and M. Are you guys able to understand this point?
Yes, sir.
So pole strength, as it's like a compound noun, that's it. Strength of a particular pole, as simple as that. There is no big definition for it and all. Now, when this is having a pole strength, when this pole is having a pole strength, this pole is having a pole strength. Now I'll create every similarity from the chapter of electrostatics only. Okay. Now, if I ask you, what is magnetic dipole moment? What did you guys tell me? So what expression did we use for the magnetic dipole moment in the previous case?
IA.
We used it as I into A. But can I use IA concept here because I don't have current? I cannot measure the value of current. I have to sit and write that complicated expression. right? So this is one of the definitions of magnetic dipole moment in terms of an electromagnet. Now the question is, if you talk about a permanent magnet, will I be able to establish a similar relation like how we did for electric field? For example, if I have a positive charge and a negative charge which are separated by a small distance, that is in terms of angstroms or nanometer, if both the charges have the same value q and the distance of separation between them is qa, then you can define a particular physical quantity which is called as electric dipole moment, whose value is given by what?
2A.
The charge
AQ.
magnitude of either of the charges multiplied by the distance of separation between them. I hope it is clear till this point. In a similar way, if you take a magnet, each pole is going to have a strength associated with it. If I take that as M and M, if the distance of separation between these poles, if I call it as 2L, because it's like acting like a dipole, right? Is it not a dipole? You have a south pole and north pole. You have two poles. Obviously, it's a dipole, right? If I ask you the magnetic dipole moment to be defined here, what will you guys tell me?
2LM.
So create a similarity. Instead of charge, I will write M. Instead of 2A, I will write it as 2M. So what will be the mathematical expression for the magnetic pole strength? It is going to be the dipole moment divided by the distance of separation between the poles. Are you guys able to understand? So this is what is the actual way things go. So in this chapter, the advantage is, if at all you forget any concept, you can always bring the similarity from the first chapter. Are you guys able to understand this point? Am I clear till here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now the question is, if I need to give a unit to it, unit to whom? Unit to the pole strength. What will be the unit that we have?
Ampere meter.
SI unit is going to be ampere meter square divided by meter. This and this will get cancelled. It will be ampere. So this is the value of pole strength of a particular pole of a given magnet. Is it clear? So now you can imagine that if you have two different magnets, yes, their pole strengths might vary. Just like how one charge can have 5 coulomb value and the other can have 2 coulomb. In a similar way, one can produce a different level of flux compared to the other. So one might be a stronger magnet, other might be a weaker magnet. Okay?
Okay.
So make a note of this part also. See, all these things are, I don't think it is there in the textbook. Just a minute. Bar, even, no, it is not there. Okay. So it is better you make a note of what I explained. One minute. This one. Clear? Now, what we'll do is, see, there is another important derivation in this chapter, which is called as this part. I'll show you. That is, we have to prove that a bar magnet is similar to is equivalent to a solenoid. Means you know how a solenoid behaves, right? According to the fourth chapter, solenoid is an electromagnet. We have to say that an electromagnet like a solenoid has similar properties that will be exhibited by a bar magnet. So this is another important derivation. But we need to understand some more theory before we get into this derivation. Okay. For that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to derive certain expression like how we did for, do you people remember this derivation? Electric field due to a dipole along axial point along equatorial. So we did that, right? We are going to do the similar thing. Instead of electric, we are going to replace with the word magnetic. So what will be the heading, guys? Magnetic field due to a
Dipole.
So here, one important point to be kept in your mind is magnetic field due to a small bar magnet, because if it has to act like a dipole, the distance of separation should be small. Magnetic field due to a small bar magnet along axial point. At least, see here, you don't need the equatorial point. You at least need to know the axial point for you to understand the next derivation. It is then you can say, yes, it is similar.
Sir, one doubt, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, isn't this in deleted portions? Is this deleted or not?
It is deleted, but you will not understand.
Okay.
This chapter completely is deleted. The deleted portion is full of nonsense only. Nonsense na vandu na solra that content is needed actually. I don't know why they deleted.
Yes, sir.
Adillana I cannot go to the next part.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay,
see, I will show you. Okay. See, here they would have derived this relation. B is equal to mu naught m divided by mu naught into 2m divided by 4 pi r cube. This is the expression that will come out of a solenoid. But the whole point is, how do you know that this is the expression for a bar magnet also? Because in this book, if you refer it anywhere, nowhere it is mentioned. First of all, adve tappu. Okay. So there is no other option. You have to learn this.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So this is m and this is m. This is 2l. Okay. So how are we going to derive the expression? So we need to divide it into two equal parts. This is going to be the center. And this is going to be point P. So this distance will be L and this distance will be L. Is it clear? So what do I need to take this distance? Recollect the derivation. We take this distance as R. All the distances for a dipole are measured from its center. That we know. Right? See, now I have an important question to be asked. You remember the formula for electric field? So electric field, if I ask you the electric field due to a point charge, correct? What is the electric field due to a point charge? It is K Q divided by R square. But which, see, we need to have a definition for electric field. So what is the basic definition of electric field that is telling us? It is the electrostatic force divided by the magnitude of the test charge. Can I write it like this? I'm repeating it again. It is the electrostatic force divided by the magnitude of the test charge. In a similar way, will I be able to establish a relation for a bar magnet? I'm repeating it again. Will I be able to establish a relation for a bar magnet and find the magnetic field in terms of its pole strength? Because in this chapter, what is being replaced? Q is being replaced with pole strength. And K is replaced with what? K is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. K is replaced with mu naught divided by 4 pi. Are you guys able to understand this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Now my question is, how am I going to derive a similar expression for this? So if electric field is defined as the electrostatic field divided by the charge, the test charge, then how can I define the magnetic field in terms of pole strength?
Magnetic force by
magnetic force divided by the pole strength. Can I write it like this? Because what is our objective? I need to derive the magnetic field. That is my objective. Magnetic field along which point? Along an axial point. So I need to know an expression for magnetic field in terms of pole strength. So if the electric field due to a point charge is KQ by R square, what will be the magnetic field due to an individual pole?
mu naught by 4 pi m by r.
Mu naught divided by 4 pi into
m by r square.
M divided by r square. I hope this is clear, right? Mu naught into m divided by 4 pi r square. Now, if I take this as the first point, if this as the second point, magnetic field due to the first point at point P, what is it going to be? So what is this distance, guys? This is r minus L. And this distance is r plus L. B1. Tell me what is B1. Looking at that expression, you tell me mu naught divided by 4 pi is there. This pole has a pole strength M. This pole has a pole strength M. M divided by
R minus L the whole square.
Very good. It is r minus L the whole square. Now the question is, what is the direction? Due to a north pole means if I place, see, in the case of electric field, the test charge that we used was positive in nature. Am I right? It was positive charge. In a similar way, what is the test pole I'm supposed to use in the case of magnetic field? Which pole is similar to positive charge?
North pole.
So if I place a north pole here, my question is, due to this north pole, will the test north pole repel or attract?
Repel.
Repel.
Repel means this is the direction of magnetic field due to the first north pole, which is close to point P. I hope you guys are clear. So if I write it as vector, then this is going to be I cap. Clear? Secondly, what is the value of B2? Mu naught divided by 4 pi M divided by
R plus L.
R plus L the whole
R
square.
plus L the whole square into minus I cap. So B vector will be equal to what? B1 vector plus B2 vector. Don't write it as B1 plus B2. They are vectors, right? So mu naught divided by 4 pi and M is also common. Can I write it as 1 divided by R minus L the whole square minus 1 divided by R plus L the whole square?
Yes, sir.
Now listen. Mu naught M divided by 4 pi into R plus L the whole square minus R minus L the whole square divided by R square minus L square the whole square. Right. So A plus B the whole square minus A minus B the whole square is 4AB. Right. So it is mu naught M divided by 4 pi into 4 RL divided by, tell me what was the approximation we did in the case of electric field? R square minus A square was approximated to
0.
R square.
Okay.
R is
R square
greater than L,
it is
so R square.
It is R square. So R square the whole square. Right. So it is mu naught M divided by 4 pi into 4 RL divided by R power 4. Correct? This and this will get cancelled. Now the question is mu naught M into L divided by 4 pi R cube into, can I write it as 4? Now listen. What is the formula for dipole moment you guys told me? It is 2AQ. Then what will be the value of magnetic dipole moment that will be written?
2LM.
2LM.
2L into M. So this 4, can I write it as 2 into 2? So 2L into M, I can combine and write it as magnetic dipole moment. So 2 into mu naught into capital M divided by 4 pi R cube means, if I write mu naught by 4 pi separately, it is 2M divided by R cube. Now, if you compare this with this, you will get a clarity why it is so. You're able to understand. So mu naught divided by 4 pi into 2M divided by R cube. Is this expression not similar to Kp divided by R cube? 2 Kp divided by R cube? It's similar. Right. So K into 2P divided by R cube. Can I write it like this? Instead of K, you have mu naught by 4 pi. That's the difference. Okay. Are you guys able to understand this?
Yes, sir.
So this is what happens. So based on this fact only, we will be able to prove that a bar magnet is similar to whom? To a solenoid. Equatorial we need not derive. That is not needed. Yeah, sure.
Sir, can you scroll down a little?
Clear? So, are you done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll do one thing. The next topic needs at least 20 minutes. So I'll stop with this. But before next class, you have to recollect magnetic field due to a circular coil along its axis. I'll show you. For you to understand the next derivation, one minute. You need to remember the final result of this. This one. Okay. Just revise it so that we can complete it. Maximum 2 more classes, this chapter will be done. It's a very small chapter. Okay. I hope there are no doubts.
No doubt, sir.
No doubt, sir.
Okay. Just wait for a minute, okay? Don't. Just wait for a minute.